Welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to the United Against Violence collaboration with California Congressional leader to Stop Hate, a virtual event hosted by CAUSE, Center for Asian Americans United for Self-Empowerment. CAUSE was founded 28 years ago with the mission to empower the Asian Pacific American community through increased political and civic participation, voter engagement, and leadership development. For the past 14 months, the country has faced an unprecedented public health crisis. The Asian American and Pacific Islander community has faced additional threat of anti-AAPI hate incidents. In recent weeks, the pandemic appears to have turned the corner and we see the end of the tunnel. However, the anti-AAPI hate situation seems to have gotten worse, and the level of violence has increased. The situation has become intolerable for the community. We have come together to protest, to call attention to the problem, and to seek help. This is not an Asian American problem. This is an American problem. America must come together to deal with this crisis. CAUSE has recognized the need for allyship early on. For a year now, CAUSE has engaged in cross-cultural dialogues and done joint projects with leaders from the African American, Latinx, and the Jewish communities to seek common understanding, to educate, and to eliminate ignorance that has resulted in racism. Partnering with LA Urban League, HOPE Hispanics Organized for Political Equality, we have been conducting public opinion polls in California with the emphasis on the community of color so that we have a better understanding of our reaction towards the pandemic, our feelings on race, and attitudes towards each other. The results have formed the basis for a deeper dive in our public dialogues. We must also engage our political leaders, and that's the purpose of today's event. Yesterday, LA Urban League, HOPE, and the Jewish Center for Justice issued a joint statement with CAUSE to stand with our community, to face the challenge with unity. Next week, we will go back to the field to do another round of opinion polls to measure the latest public opinion. We have an incredible lineup of speakers today. Manju Kulkarni, the Executive Director of AAPI, Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council. If there's ever a project that's most responsible for the public attention on anti-AAPI hate, it is the Stop AAPI Hate Project, co-founded by AAPI and Manju. It has provided the data and the analysis on this crisis. We are also honored to have two of the most dynamic, influential political leaders in our country. They're both from Southern California joining us today. Senator Alex Padilla and Congressman Ted Lieu. Both have strong ties to the Asian Pacific American community and cause. Their rise to prominence has coincided with the growth of the Asian Pacific American community and cause. We have always kept in touch. We're very pleased to have them come back and stand with us on this moment of crisis. In particular, CAUSE like to congratulate Senator Padilla. The last time we met, he addressed our community and encouraged voter turnout prior to the November election as our Secretary of State. Now he's back as our Senator. Congratulations, Senator. With that, I'm turning over the screen to our own dynamic leader, CAUSE Executive Director, Nancy Yep. Nancy?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for being here. And thank you to all of our speakers and our guests today joining us for this conversation around collaboration and standing united against violence. We want to give each of our guests an opportunity to share who they are, what they do, and in particular, what their efforts are to stop hate. After each of them speak, we will have a Q&A. We actually had sent opportunities for community members to ask questions prior to this event. If you have additional questions, you can put them in the Q&A box or in the chat. We will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. And then also as part of this event, if you're in the Zoom room, there is a live transcript button that also includes English subtitles, should that make it easier for you to view and participate. So with that, I want to invite Senator Padilla to share with us who he is, what he does, and what he's doing to stop hate.
Great. Well, thank you, Nancy, and greetings to everybody. Thank you for joining us for this obviously very timely and very important conversation. I want to thank my colleague, Congressman Ted Lieu, for the years and years of friendship and partnership. Of course, Stop AAPI Hate for their work and advocacy over the years, particularly at this difficult time, doubly difficult time. And my friend Charlie Wu and Cause, as he mentioned, we've known each other for many, many years throughout my career in public service, from my days on the Los Angeles City Council to my days in the state Senate. Of course, my time as California Secretary of State. Charlie mentioned we did work jointly last year to promote voter registration and participation, as well as the census. And so I'm pleased to continue, I'm honored to continue the relationship on important issues going forward. And, you know, clearly the recent rise in hate crimes targeting the AAPI community demands our partnership and action and voices. You know, for starters, I just want to make it clear that we all clearly condemn any and all hate crimes against anybody, but especially the recent uptick in hate crimes targeting the AAPI community. Racism and hate have no place, not in California, not in our country, not anywhere at any time. And before I get into some of the specific action items that I've been asked to share, I was also asked to share a little bit more of my background for the new friends that are part of today's event. You know, I was recently appointed to fill the vacancy of now Vice President Kamala Harris by Governor Newsom. And so I'm your newest United States Senator and proud to bring not just my professional experience over the years to this job of serving as your representative, but frankly, my life experience and my family's journey as important contributions to the legislative process in our nation's capital. I'm a native of Los Angeles. I grew up in the working class community of Pacoima, California, in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, just a couple miles from the Japanese American Community Center in Arleta. And I'm a proud son of immigrants. My parents came to the United States in the 1960s, as many families do, in pursuit of a better future, you know, to achieve the American dream. They actually met in Los Angeles. They were from different regions in Mexico, decided to, they fell in love, decided to get married, and they applied for green cards in that order. And I thank the US government every day for saying yes, because if those applications would have been denied, clearly my life story would be a lot different. But my parents soon settled into the San Fernando Valley, got married, and started a family. My father's now retired. For 40 years, he worked as a short order cook in various diners around Los Angeles. So a lot of scrambled eggs, a lot of pancakes, a lot of sandwiches. For the same 40 years, my mom used to clean houses in some of the wealthier communities of the San Fernando Valley. But together, they raised the three of us. I have an older sister who is an educator. I have a younger brother who works for Los Angeles City Council President Nuri Martinez as her chief of staff. And I'm the middle child that gets to serve and represent us all in the United States Senate. But it was really the example of my parents' activism and community organizing that influenced my brother, my sister, and I to be public servants and to do what we can to help make our communities a better place, whether it was by watching my parents organize our neighbors to push back against an uptick in crime when we were younger, dealing with a lot of the gang activity and drug dealing that we saw in the 1980s. We saw the example of my parents as community leaders and activists. For me, the direct inspiration to enter not just community involvement, but specifically electoral politics came in 1994 when I was fresh back from earning my mechanical engineering degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Fresh back from college, degree in hand. It was not just a wonderful moment for me, but the fulfillment of my parents' dreams that my brother and my sister and I would get a good education. When I came home soon thereafter, it was time for the general election in 1994. And for those of you who may remember 1994, there was a measure on the California ballot at the time that we now refer to as Proposition 187. Sadly, in many ways, a precursor to the immigrant scapegoating measures that we've seen in Arizona and Texas in recent years. Unfortunately, it was a big theme and definition of the Trump administration for the prior 4 years. And it was seeing our community and families like mine scapegoated in California in 1994 that opened my eyes. And I realized that I had no choice but to get involved to help register more voters in my community, to help mobilize more voters in my community if we wanted to change the politics of hate towards the politics of inclusion in the state of California. Thankfully, that measure never went into effect. It was deemed unconstitutional, but it motivated me to get involved. And flash forward to today, again, I now get to serve as United States Senator, where we're still reeling from the Trump era. Donald Trump is no longer president, but Trumpism, sadly, is still alive and well. And while he's no longer president, we're still dealing with the effects of his failure as a leader, but his divisiveness and cruelty, especially during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. For him to use racist rhetoric as often as he did on Twitter, on social media, but also from the White House, from the Oval Office itself, it has had a direct effect on the political environment we continue to live in, and he directly instigated a lot of the hate crimes that bring us to this event and this gathering today. California has always tried to be a policy leader, and a lot of our policy forward thinking is rooted in us celebrating and putting tremendous value on our diversity. California has the most populous state in the nation and the most diverse state in the nation. And so it's our opportunity to be leaders once again, where we see the uptick in hate crimes, not only in places like Atlanta and elsewhere around the country, but even here in our home state, both in Northern and in Southern California. And I think organizations like Cause and Stop AAPI Hate for doing their part, not just in calling attention to what's going on, but to making sure that we have good data and information to work from to speak out against hate and take strategic action. I'll call your attention to research. Stop AAPI Hate has documented that from March, the beginning of the pandemic, to just this last February, nearly 3,800 racially motivated attacks against Asian Americans during the course of the pandemic, directly related again to the racist rhetoric we heard from Donald Trump and a lot of his allies. A recent Pew survey also found that 31% of Asian Americans have been subjected to racial slurs since the beginning of the pandemic. Many of us have seen the viral videos online that have documented too many members of the AAPI community being harassed or physically attacked in many communities across the country unprompted. The AAPI community deserves better than to have to live in fear to leave their home as part of our daily lives. And it's our collective responsibility to stand up and to speak up in order to stop it. And so that's why I've been proud to, in my first couple of months as Senator for California, to join with my colleagues, Senator Hirono and Duckworth, to support critical legislation that stands in solidarity with AAPI communities throughout the country. The specific bill I've signed on to will make it clear that hate and racism will not be tolerated anywhere in the United States of America. We're advancing a resolution that condemns all forms of anti-Asian discrimination and calls on federal officials to address the rise in COVID-19 related hate crimes. And I'm proud to report that Senator Schumer, the majority leader in the Senate, has recently announced that we're likely to bring this resolution to the floor this coming month for formal action and vote by the United States Senate, because it's not only important that we do so, but it's important that we act urgently given what's going on across the country. Collectively, we can and must stand up to hate and injustice. So, look forward to reporting back on what else we will do in the United States Senate. And I look forward to continuing to work with CAUSE, Stop AAPI Hate, all the leaders on this panel, and all of you to restore justice and fairness for all Americans. So with that, I will wrap it up and look forward to your questions. But thank you again, Charlie and Nancy, for this great opportunity.
Thank you so much, Senator Padilla, for sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey. And I think something I know I resonated with just hearing about your family and your parents and how that moved all the way and shows up in the work you do now. So thank you for that. I now want to welcome Representative Ted Lieu to speak. He represents California's 33rd Congressional District and has been a longtime friend of CAUSE. And I would like to invite you to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you're doing to stop hate.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and want to first of all thank Charlie Wu for starting CAUSE and for all your tremendous advocacy and support of Americans, including Asian Americans, and I really appreciate what you've done for the community. And so honored to be on here with Manju, who has done amazing work, especially with Stop AAPI Hate and being able to track hate crimes and hate incidents. Having data is very important. And so honored to be with my longtime friend, Senator Alex Padilla. We served together in California State Legislature. We're now in DC, and it's just a great honor to be able to work with him on a variety of different issues. Also very proud to be able to co-lead on the House side his legislation on giving citizenship to frontline workers. Now, in terms of the hate incidents and hate crimes against the Asian American community, I'm going to first of all tell you a little bit about my story, then I'll discuss why I think we're seeing a spike in hate incidents, and then some ways to respond to it. So my story is the same as many of yours or your parents or your grandparents. I am an immigrant. And when my parents looked at a map of America, they said, we're going to go to Cleveland. So that's where I grew up. And my parents were poor. We started off living in the basement of a person's home, and they would go to flea markets and sell gifts and jewelry to make ends meet. They eventually opened one gift store in a shopping center, and then they worked hard 7 days a week, opened one gift and jewelry store in a shopping mall. And eventually they expanded to 6 stores. And my brother and I would help watch those stores because we were free labor. But at some point, it became clear to me that they achieved the American dream. My parents went from being poor to a home, gave my brother and I an amazing education. My brother is now a doctor, and my parents still remind me of that. But it's one reason I joined the U.S. Air Force on active duty. I believe I can never give back to America everything this amazing country has given to my family. One reason I choose to remain in the reserves. I am a colonel at Los Angeles Air Force Base. By the way, as a side note, I'm very excited that yesterday their Space Force announced that they're going to locate Space Systems Command at Los Angeles Air Force Base, dramatically expanding the missions at the base and also helping our region. So it's a very exciting announcement, something that Congressman Calvert and I have been working on as chairs of the Aerospace Caucus. So after Air Force active duty, I stayed in the reserves. I also then went into private practice as a lawyer. I'm also a recovering lawyer. Did that for several years, and then I was elected to Torrance City Council. I then went in the state legislature for about 9 years, and now I'm in my 4th term in Congress. And if you look at the rise in hate incidents and hate crimes against Asian Americans, it is not particularly surprising given our nation's history. We've seen in the past when America becomes fearful, oftentimes it will start scapegoating different communities, including the Asian community. We know in the 1850s, we had the whole yellow peril hysteria that was then followed by one of the largest mass lynchings in US history of Chinese immigrants. That was followed by the Chinese Exclusion Act. Then we had an internment of over 100,000 Americans in World War II that happened to be of Japanese descent. Then in the 1980s, when America feared the rise of Japan, we saw additional hate crimes, including the murder of Vincent Chen, who happened to be Chinese American. And now with this pandemic, we're seeing assaults on Asian Americans again. And whether you're a Filipino American or Chinese American or Korean American, it doesn't really matter. If you're Asian, your health and life is somewhat more at risk. And it is really something we all have to tackle and work together to address. Some of the responses in Congress, Senator Padilla mentioned legislation, and I'm a co-author of several of those pieces of legislation. I also recently introduced my own legislation with Congresswoman Lucy McBath out of Georgia. We both sit on the House Judiciary Committee. When you look at the federal hate crime statute, it turns out that it's not used that often. And the reason it's not used that often is because the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals interpreted the language very narrowly to basically say that race, gender, religion, or other protected classes have to be the sole reason for the crime. Number one, that's a very hard standard to meet. Number two, it doesn't really comport with reality. I'm a former prosecutor. It's very clear to me that defendants commit crimes oftentimes for multiple reasons. So the legislation I've introduced with Congresswoman McBath, it's been co-authored by 25 members of Congress so far. It changes the standard. And it changes the standard to say that you can charge a hate crime at the federal level if race or another protected class was a contributory motivating factor in the defendant's commission of the crime. And that's based on our view that race just shouldn't be a factor in crime at all. And if you're going to target someone for a variety of reasons, and one of those reasons is race, then we believe that should constitute as a federal hate crime. In addition, we need to devote more resources to prosecutors and investigators, both at the federal level as well as in local jurisdictions, if there is a hate crime. And we also need more reporting. So one of the great things that Stop AAPI Hate has done is it's elevated awareness to the media, into communities across America of the increase in hate incidents and hate crimes. We also know, based on other reporting, that in 2020, across 16 major cities, we had a spike of about 150% in hate crimes against Asian Americans. So raising awareness is very important. Getting resources out is important. And also, I think making hate crimes prosecutions easier is also important. In addition, we do have to address the rhetoric, as Senator Padilla stated. When you've got the former president of the United States using racist phrases, that is not helpful. And we had a hearing in the House subcommittee on the Judiciary Committee. We did a hearing on Asian American violence, and some of the experts testified that you can actually see a correlation between the former president's use of racist phrases like Kung Flu and the spike in hate crimes against Asian Americans. Thankfully, we have a new president now, and it's such a sea change of difference. President Biden already signed an executive order directing federal agencies to combat hate crimes against Asian Americans. He's devoting more resources to federal agencies, including the Department of Justice. President Biden and Vice President Harris went to Georgia, specifically met with Asian American leaders. President Biden mentioned the Asian American community in a primetime national speech. Those are things, first of all, that the former president would not have done and did not do. And nor have I actually seen many other presidents do what President Biden has already done in terms of outreach to the Asian American community during this time of crisis. So I look forward to continuing working with the Biden administration and working with all of you. And at the end of the day, I believe America is an exceptional country. We are not perfect, but we do try to move towards a more perfect union. And with your help and support, we're going to get closer to that ideal. Happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you again for CAUSE and the CAUSE Board of Directors for putting on this wonderful program.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Lieu, for sharing your story. And I think every time I see you, I admittedly, because I'm from Ohio, just love hearing that part of the narrative. And for me, I think just really remembering the value of seeing ourselves represented in the stories and the leaders who are doing the work. So thank you for that and for that recap of all that you're doing right now. Now I want to invite Manju Kulkarni to share more information about the Stop AAPI Hate work that she's doing through Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, where she's the executive director. Manju, I'd like to invite you on.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you to CAUSE. It's so wonderful to be with you all today, and it was great to be with Nancy earlier today in an in-person meeting that we had with Governor Newsom about these very issues alongside other members of APCON. Just also want to express my appreciation to Charlie and the board of directors of CAUSE and longtime friends, Tammy and Adam, and also to express my appreciation for the tremendous leadership of Senator Padilla and Congressman Lieu. It's really, again, an honor to be with you all. Next slide. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to share with you what we've seen at Stop AAPI Hate. I'm not going to read these examples, but you see that these are incidents that are emblematic of the type of incident reports we've received at Stop AAPI Hate between March of last year and February. You see that there's a refusal of service in the top left-hand corner from a ride-hailing company, elderly grandparents who are accosted on the street, a physician who was berated by a patient. Beneath that is an individual who experienced a physical attack, a tech executive who made racist comments, even evoking the president, former president himself, and making those. And then finally, the one on the left bottom corner, a middle school child who was physically attacked and verbally assaulted. This took place here in Los Angeles before there was a single confirmed case of COVID-19 in Southern California. Really disturbing to us, especially since it happened to a young child. Next slide. So it was because of this that APCON banded together with Chinese for Affirmative Action and San Francisco State University to create Stop AAPI Hate. As trusted organizations in the AAPI community with over 100 years of experience, we were able to get several hundred incident reports in just a few short weeks. We knew that it was important to reach out to limited English proficient communities, and so we developed our form in multiple Asian languages that are listed there. Next slide. And so I wanted to just spend the bulk of my time talking about what the data shows us. So in that time period, we saw 3,800 incidents, the vast majority of which are hate incidents and not hate crimes. This is really important to remember when we think of policy solutions. So when I say that they're not hate crimes, that means they do not involve an underlying criminal element. Crimes are most notably battery, sexual assault or rape, homicide, can also involve property damage such as arson or vandalism. But these are not those. These involve verbal harassment, civil rights violations and such, and I'll go into that in a minute. They come from all 50 states and the District of Columbia, reported by members of all parts of our community. And we know that women, sadly, are bearing the brunt of hate against Asian Americans. 68% of the reports we've received come from women. And other targeted communities include those that are vulnerable, such as seniors, as well as youth that report at 10%. Next slide. And so when we delve into the data, we see that what tops the list is verbal harassment. This is name calling. This is using language like go back to your country, you brought COVID, things like that. Then we have avoidance and shunning, but not the type that we're using to keep safe from each other, but actually of a racist nature. We have physical assaults. And then the last four there are those civil rights violations of which I spoke: workplace discrimination, refusal of service, some forms of vandalism and graffiti, and being barred from transit or transportation. Next slide. And when we look at the sites of discrimination, we see that a significant number come from businesses. So that's also noteworthy when we think of what solutions are appropriate in terms of training of employees, holding businesses accountable. That's followed by public streets, public parks, and transit. And you see there that the numbers for schools and universities is relatively low. We believe that is because in many parts of the country, they're still virtual or hybrid. And so students are not in person in the way that they were prior to the pandemic. Next slide. And so here we see the communities that have been targeted, and certainly Chinese Americans make up a plurality of those community members, but also Korean, Vietnamese, Filipino, Japanese, and so on. I want to make a few specific points here, and I want to actually appreciate the questions that were asked regarding Pacific Islanders. So we use the term Stop AAPI Hate in an effort to be inclusive. And in fact, we have gotten a number of incident reports from Pacific Islander community members. They are under 1%, which is why they're not reflected in this particular graph. But like Southeast Asians and South Asians, they have experienced similar types of hate, being told to go back to their country, being told that they carry COVID and have brought it to the United States. And we are working very closely with PI leaders to make sure that we get resources to PI communities and really uplift their stories. In fact, if you look at our most recent report, you'll see that it includes a vignette from a Pacific Islander. The other point I want to make is that white, Hispanic, or Latino and African Americans are included here because we do allow individuals to report incidents they witness. And those are individuals who found that behavior they witnessed to be abhorrent, and so they reported it to Stop AAPI Hate. Lastly, the point there of Asian under 9% is individuals who are multiracial most commonly or don't identify with a specific group. And my very last slide is just to say that this has had significant impacts on our communities in terms of depression, anxiety, other issues, even in terms of unemployment rates, small business closures. And we see too that there are policies against our communities that are having significant impact as well. And last slide. And so with that, I just want to end and welcome questions and again, appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and to be part of this cause community.
Thank you, Manjusha. Thank you for sharing that data, for all the work that you're doing and putting a little context to it. I think it's really helpful for us to understand the data and actually the stories around the data. Before we jump into Q&A, I do want to share a little bit more about Cause's work and how Cause's work fits into today's conversation. We also believe that stopping hate will take a collective effort with a lot of different solutions. And Cause's solutions, many of which are long-term, really help us build towards the future. And I think for us, it's about investing resources into the leaders of tomorrow through programs like our Cause Leadership Institute for professionals and our Cause Leadership Academy for students, where folks can learn about the civic engagement process, have opportunities to meet different elected officials, but also understand what it looks like to work in government and also to work with nonprofit organizations as they advocate. And now more than ever, we just know that it's important for our leaders to prepare, to build their confidence, because we're going to need them as we shape the future and create this positive change. And so just a little bit more about the work that Charlie had mentioned earlier, but also that we are going to be releasing another multi-ethnic statewide community poll. It's part of a series that we've done around race relations in California in partnership with Hispanics Organized for Political Equity and Los Angeles Urban League. And so together we want to have those difficult conversations. We want to see the data and understand where the problems are and how to create the solutions together, which is so much of the reason we had this event today. And so I'd love for the panelists to also turn their cameras back on so we can all be together for a conversation. And as everybody sort of joins me, the question that we had, so we did ask questions or ask for questions ahead of time. A few questions had come in. I'm going to start with this one that I think all of us can answer in relation to the pandemic. So throughout the pandemic, it has been difficult for AAPI communities to have access to resources that are needed. This is exacerbated by anti-Asian hate and the avoidance of ethnic neighborhoods. What are ways that our communities can advocate for additional resources and access to services? What are some ways that you can ensure that our communities nationwide will be able to have access to these resources and that culturally sensitive community services are given the support they need?
If it's okay, I can start, Nancy. What the work that we're doing is part of a four-pronged approach. In addition to our online reporting form and reporting center, we are also providing resources to the community through our website, as well as direct assistance. And we are trying also and have been very grateful to work with Senator Padilla's staff and Congressman Lieu's staff in thinking of what the right policy solutions are. They mentioned a couple of those, which are to really look at what are some of the key drivers around hate crimes and to incorporate race as one of the contributing factors when looking at hate crimes. We know with the Atlanta incident, for example, law enforcement early on, unfortunately made a number of problematic statements that evidenced really some desire on their part to provide exoneration or exculpatory reasons for what happened, rather than looking at all of the evidence. And so it's really important that we have bills like that in Congress and making their way through the halls of Congress. What I want to say specifically in terms of some of the assistance is we are providing pro bono legal help to community members through CalAPABA, as well as community mediation efforts and trainings with Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and also looking at local collaboratives. And I want to just shine the light for a moment on LA versus hate, which I think is really a model across the country and something we've shared with Senator Padilla's staff, which is that it's a program under 211 where individuals can report their hate incidents from any community, not specifically or exclusively Asian American communities. They get case management and then direct support from organizations like APCON, like CHIRLA, like the Brotherhood Crusade. And we help in providing mental health resources. We provide, help with, speaking with elected officials, mental health and other resources. So I think programs like that, we believe, are part of what we need in terms of moving forward in a civil rights infrastructure. And so I welcome opportunities to engage with our legislators on state and federal levels in terms of building that infrastructure.
Nancy, if I could just add to that, I mean, appreciate the partnership with Manju and Stop AAPI Hate. definitely want to make sure anybody who is fearful or is actually a victim of a crime is able to report it and pursue investigations, prosecutions, etc. But there's a whole nother dimension. If the simple fear of becoming a victim keeps people from accessing resources and services that they need and deserve, how to make sure we're overcoming that. So first, it starts with the resources. So on behalf of Congressman Lieu and I just want to uplift the American Rescue Plan. That's been such a significant investment and improvement to our nation's COVID response. I'm hoping you've read in the last few weeks the increase in vaccination supply and improved distribution and all those things that everybody should be ready to get the vaccine if you haven't gotten it already. In addition to improved vaccines, the American Rescue Plan provides funding, direct assistance for working families, direct assistance to small businesses that have been struggling and impacted this last year during the course of the pandemic. I'm sure I speak for the congressman and I when I say, call our offices, our staff is there ready to help to navigate, to find and make sure you're receiving the resources that we all deserve, in addition to the state and local government funding that's part of the rescue plan. And when it comes to housing, for example, just specific line items to help families that may be behind on the mortgage because of the down economy, because of COVID, or maybe behind on rent if you're a renter, if you're, again, economically impacted because of the pandemic. And there's even funding for people experiencing homelessness in partnership with local governments and local organizations. So just from an equity lens, two last points. One, specific funding to make sure that vaccine distribution is in recognition of California's diversity. We know some communities have been hit harder by the COVID-19 pandemic than others. That's number one. And even making sure that Health and Human Services has the resources they need to launch multilingual public education campaigns and multilingual outreach campaigns to reach all communities and not just have this work done through general markets.
So I'll just quickly follow up on what Senator Padilla said. The American Rescue Plan has these amazing benefits for all Americans, but for some of those programs, you're going to need to know how to access it. So perhaps you're low income or you didn't have any income last year and you thought, oh, you don't need to file taxes. Well, if you don't do that, and let's say you have 3 young kids, you're not going to get the child tax credit. And if you have 3 young kids under 6, that means you're going to lose out on over $10,000 of money that the government's just going to send you. So it's very important to make sure that everyone knows how to access these benefits, and to extent community groups can do educational events or get the word out that yes, you need to file taxes to get a lot of these benefits, and people need to understand how to access these things. That would be very helpful, and to do it in language will be helpful as well.
Yeah. And last but not least, the specific comment about the vaccines themselves. Number one, COVID vaccines are free. There's some people that are fearful that if they get the vaccine, they're going to get a bill later or they're going to be asked to pay. So it's important to remind people COVID vaccines are at no charge. And also without regard to citizenship status. We know there's a lot of immigrants, documented and undocumented, that are also hesitant to maybe sign up for the vaccine because they're not citizens. And so we need to help overcome that through sharing the right information about COVID.
Thank you, everyone. I think one of the questions that I saw, and I think has come up in a few different ways, and I heard some of that in all of your answers around how people can get involved, how they can help get out the word. A few people asked how they can support the policies that, or the bills that you have on the table. Are there tangible things that people can do in our communities that actually support your efforts? And what does that look like for individuals?
So I thought Abraham Lincoln had it right when he said public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. So I wanted all of you to understand your power to help shape public sentiment. Social media is free. If you write a post that's interesting, you might affect someone in California or Florida or Ohio or Nevada. If you want to, for example, engage in newspapers, think about writing a letter to the editor. It is true that many newspapers get letters to the editor. It's also true they get them from the same people. So when you start writing in, eventually you're going to get published and you can start changing hearts and minds. Think about lobbying your local, state, or federal elected officials. It's true that we do get a bunch of people that call in and email and so on. But again, some of those folks are repeat people. And if a lot of people do start calling in about a certain issue, it does cause me and my staff to go, hey, why are these folks calling in on any particular issue? So there's a variety of ways for you to try to change public sentiment and obviously report hate incidents to organizations like Stop AAPI Hate. That would be very helpful as well.
Yeah, and just to echo that and add another layer to it, you know, I'll add the importance of speaking up and sharing stories and experiences. You know, Manju presented some tremendously compelling data, and I hope I'm not out of turn here when I suggest that it is probably not 100% accurate because we have significant underreporting in communities of color, people who may have been victims of crime, verbal abuse or physical attacks or anything else that are fearful of reporting it. So the more we can encourage people to speak up and share their experience and stories, number one, it gives us better data with which we can use to better distribute resources and inform public policy. But you never know what the compelling, powerful experience is going to be that's going to change minds and change hearts. I'll share with you one of my early experiences as a member of the Senate. And I've been appointed to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And one of the first hearings I had an opportunity to participate in as a member of the Judiciary Committee was a confirmation hearing for now Attorney General Merrick Garland. And when the lines of questioning came to the new senator from California to ask questions, this was the very first subject I brought up. Increasing hate crimes generally, specifically the uptick in hate crimes targeting the AAPI community. It was me seizing that opportunity to let the incoming Attorney General know that he needed to make this a priority to utilize all the powers and resources of the Department of Justice to address this, but it was only made possible because of, you know, sadly, victims of crimes coming forward, reporting them, and sharing those experiences.
And if I can add to that, Nancy, you know, there's so much that our community members can do. There's no reason that every single city council in the United States doesn't have a resolution against hate right now. That's an easy one where we can all say that we condemn hate against our communities. Number two, as both the senator and the congressman noted, is when we have community members speak up, calling their members of Congress and their senators, it's important that we talk about really enhancing our civil rights laws. Some of them haven't been updated really since the 1960s. And at Stop AAPI Hate, we've looked very specifically at even the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which unfortunately has some gaps. And given that not all of our states have strong laws that protect our civil rights, there are opportunities. And Senator Padilla couldn't be more right when he says there is underreporting. And so we would love for folks to report to Stop AAPI Hate and other entities, because the Pew Center tells us that 3 in 10 Asian Americans have experienced hate. That equates to 8 million individuals, 8 million, not 3,800, not 4,800, 8 million. And so if we're going to solve this problem together, we need each and every person in our community to be involved.
I have a quick follow-up with what Manju said. As some of you may know, recent reports show that at least 1 in 4 Asian American students report being bullied about race issues. So my better half, my wife Betty, happens to be president of Torrance School Board. Last month, she wrote and got passed a resolution on Asian American hate and hate incidents and standards, and sort of basically laying out for the school board and for school district condemning Asian American violence and hate. If you would like a copy of that, just contact me or my office. Other school districts have started doing those resolutions as well.
Thank you. And I think just talking about school-age children and what's possible for us just in our homes and how we can create change very locally. I think for me, a lot of the things I think about is where I'm open to learn and how I model that learning. When I'm curious or when I hear folks in my community just kind of question or say things where I know that there's information out there where we can educate one another. I think it brings us all together and allows for us to do more together. So I think if we're curious as adults and we model that with our younger generation, it kind of keeps that inquisitive mind there, but also keeps it open to what it could be. So I really encourage that kind of those things at the home really make a difference as we go out and do things in our communities. The next question I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I think for me, it's about this modeling, this idea of like, we do have a voice, we can be on social media, we can tell these stories, but I know for me, just seeing what all these stories look like, what it looks like to stand up against anti-Asian sentiment, what it looks like to stand up against things that are happening that we know are excluding our communities, and the platforms that social media affords us. We also know these anti-Asian sentiments can exist anywhere. Some of what was mentioned here today does allude to, and I think there is a long history of anti-Asian sentiment, also even from our government, from Chinese Exclusion Act to Japanese American internment. And I would say, I think watching the targeting of Chinese scientists and Southeast Asian deportation, and that all of these perpetuate ideas that we're foreign and that our community is foreign, which leads to anti-Asian violence. In addition to addressing individual violence on the street, how can you as congressional leaders and nonprofit leaders help prevent anti-Asian prejudice from surfacing in these other spaces?
You know, one way I'd like to answer that question is, you know, in terms of both inclusivity and working together across, you know, ethnicity and bringing communities of color together. And so first I want to start off though in addressing, you know, the concerns of Pacific Islander communities. And, you know, I want folks to know that this is an issue that we have looked at very closely and are in conversation with a number of Pacific Islander leaders in terms of some of the challenges around language access, ensuring that there are spokespeople from the community. And in fact, we have a number of meetings next week to address some of these concerns. So I hope that folks will continue to pay attention to what's on our site as we'll be releasing information as well as data on what's happening. And when we look more broadly across other communities of color, I think there's a moment right now of solidarity. We saw some of that even over the summer with the George Floyd protests, and many of us in AAPI communities took part in those protests and have been very active in terms of asking for accountability, asking for and really demanding changes in terms of how policing takes place in our communities. And so I think in this moment, there also is an opportunity for solidarity. One thing I want to caution against is too often I've seen anti-Blackness take hold in this moment. And I can tell you from our data explicitly that the vast majority of perpetrators are in fact white and that they do not come from other communities of color. And I think that unfortunately on social media, this has been reflected both inaccurately and in a way that drives a wedge between our communities.
I'd just add, you know, it's as important as it is for our recognized leaders, you know, elected leaders, community leaders, business leaders to stand up and speak up. It's really an opportunity for everybody to do their part. Sometimes not all the important conversations, you know, are on events like this or at press conferences that make the evening news or even national cable news. A lot of times they're in the workplace. A lot of times they're even among family. And whether somebody in your space has been a victim or a target or not, it can be uncomfortable conversations because it's a sensitive topic. All the more reason it's important to speak up. And, as adults, California is a very diverse state. That's how we learn, that's how we build that bond, that's how we demonstrate solidarity, and as teaching moments with our children, to be those positive examples. So as important, as helpful as these big public platforms are, it's really in the day-to-day that I think we're going to continue to see progress and demonstrate the value of our diversity.
One thing that gives you hope is in the last few weeks, we've seen a number of rallies across America. They weren't massive, but they weren't small either. And you had a number of non-Asian Americans come out in support of the Asian American community. It's actually something I haven't really seen before in terms of all these sort of different rallies across different communities. And I think what you're seeing is now the political awakening of the Asian American community. And I think folks realize it really doesn't matter what your income is or status, where you live, what you do. You could be the victim of a hate incident or a hate crime. And I think you're also recognizing, or I think Asian Americans are also recognizing that it's very important to work in solidarity with other groups. The Jewish American community has actually been quite strong on this issue, the Anti-Defamation League, and so on. And we've already done joint events with ADL, specifically on hate crimes towards the Asian American community. And it's all very good to see the solidarity that's forming and will continue.
Thank you. No, I think that that's a really great way to frame just what it looks like for us all to come together. We're coming to the close of our event. I want to thank our speakers for being here. We know this is just the beginning of the conversation, and we know that there's still a lot to do, but we have to start somewhere. And I'm really happy that we were able to start it here with all of you. I don't know if anyone has any last thing they want to share before we sign off, but I wanted to give a space for that.
I'll just make one quick point. And first of all, thank you again to Cause and to Nancy and Manju and Senator Padilla. It's an honor to be on this panel with you. I just want to close with some numbers. I think one reason that we had the internment of Japanese Americans is because there just weren't that many Asian Americans in general at that time. That has now changed. Since 2000, the Asian American community has more than doubled in size. We now know from a Pew Research report that there are also more immigrants from Asia to the United States than any other region in the world. So that growth is continuing. And Pew Research reports that by 2055, Asian Americans will be the largest immigrant group in the United States of America. And with every passing day, the rest of America looks more like California and New York. And it's becoming increasingly diversified. And I think that's a good thing to have in America that welcomes everyone from across the globe, and that we can all work together and make our country a better place to live, work, and play.
Great. And I'll just add, similarly, I want to thank the other panelists and Cause and Stop AAPI Hate for organizing this event. It is not the end of the conversation. It is an ongoing conversation. But in addition to these conversations and standing up and countering hate, let's not forget the ongoing work of civic engagement as the population continues to grow and young people turn 18. Let's make sure folks who are eligible are registering to vote. The 2020 election is behind us, but that means the 2022 election cycle will be here before you know it. It's important to have not just a voice day in and day out in society, but at the ballot box. Every election is important. Election results matter. And so let's keep the civic engagement work going as well.
And to just simply build on those two comments, we have a history in the US of anti-Asian hate, but we also have a history of resistance and efforts to challenge what were unjust policies and practices. And what I think is different, as Congressman Lieu said, is we have the numbers now to really, and the infrastructure. We have organizations like Cause, like APCON, and so many others across the country that are able to work in collaboration with our leaders. And we have our leaders. This is a time unlike any other. I mean, it's so wonderful to be here with Senator Padilla and Congressman Lieu to really be able to work on these issues. These are two individuals who understand our communities. And so I just want to thank them, and I want to thank Cause for all of your leadership, because I think this is a new moment. It's a different time. And I think we can work together to really address what's happening now and prevent it from happening in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Senator Padilla, Representative Lieu, and Manju for sharing with us all of this information. We've captured some of these resources and ways to learn and report incidents on our website at causeusa.org/United Against Violence Resources. So we'll put that in the chat so everyone can see that. And it's just the beginning. We know it's not a complete list. Some of those things were mentioned today in this call. You'll have a poll pop up momentarily just to ask you how it went today and if you enjoyed and learned from this conversation. But I do want to thank my board at Cause. They're really supportive and here with us today, including Charlie Wu. Thank you to the teams from Senator Padilla's office, Representative Lieu's office, and APCON's office for just helping make this move smoothly. Thank you to members of the press who are here as well, continuing to tell our stories and making sure that they're accurate. And then also thank you to the Cause team, Justine Ventura Mejia, Farah Sue, Talia Campos, and our volunteers for this event, Tiffany Huang and Wendy Chung. We hope that you were able to learn a little something today. Please tag us on social media if you've learned something and you want to share this out. But thank you everyone for coming. And thank you for all that we do together to unite against violence. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend.